Good morning, Team Turner. Today's driving question is, how has energy changed over time? Just a reminder that your date and your driving question should be underlined. You should have a pen or pencil or a sheet of paper or an exercise book to take your notes, write your answers. And just a reminder that your notes should be uploaded at the end of the lesson as a picture or as a Google document. Lastly, any other form of device not in use, please can you turn it off and put it away? Thank you. Right, this is a remember slide and it assesses your prior knowledge. Please feel free to go back to your previous lesson with Mr. Samuels in any doubt. Now, the instruction is to state whether the following resources are renewable or non-renewable. Just a reminder that the word renewable means can be replenished or can be replaced. So renewable resources are resources that can be replaced or replenished over time. It's being replaced at the same time it's being used. So that's a very, very key word, a very important key word that you need to know. Renewable versus obviously non-renewable will be the opposite. Non-renewable cannot be replaced over time. Okay? So these are your examples: wind power, coal, trees, hydroelectric power, natural gas. So you're going to write your answers down in your exercise book or on your sheet of paper. Now I'm going to ask you to pause the recording. Welcome back. So wind power, renewable. Coal, it's non-renewable. And obviously the trees, renewable. Hydroelectric is also renewable. And your natural gas is non-renewable. So just remind that your coal, your natural gas, and your oil are your fossil fuels, and those three examples are non-renewable resources, cannot be replenished or replaced over time. Keyword, right. And the moment I've been waiting for. Time for your story. What are you going to do at this point? There's no need for you to be writing. All you need to do is close your eyes and listen to the story. So, let's begin. The sun warms our seas, stirs our atmosphere, generates weather patterns, provides energy for growing green plants. The process of photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction because it receives solar energy from the sun. Carbon dioxide and water are the reactants of photosynthesis, and the products, glucose and oxygen, which is required for respiration. The Dark Ages. Have you ever wondered what life was like during the Dark Ages? Imagine a world without electricity. The Middle Ages or medieval time occurred from 476 AD to 1450. The beginning of the Middle Ages was called the Dark Ages. The Middle Ages began with the fall of the Roman Empire. The Greeks and Romans were advanced and made positive contributions to society. The great cultivations of Roman Greece had been conquered. During the Middle Ages, many people couldn't read or write. As a result of lack of knowledge, this led to superstitious beliefs. Poor people had no laws to protect them. So they relied on the lords for protection. They were bound to the lord's land and paid high rent in exchange, a system called feudalism. The only hope that people had was that life in heaven is better than earth. During the Middle Ages, there was also a bubonic plague that wiped out a third of the population in Europe. The Middle Ages are said to be dark due to lack of scientific and cultural advancements. The Renaissance began around the 1300s to the 1600s. This period followed the Middle Ages. It is best known as the rebirth of European culture, art, politics, and economics. In the 18th century, Benjamin Franklin reintroduced electricity to the public. This was demonstrated through his famous kite experiment. When the lightning struck the kite, the electric current traveled from the kite along the string to the key. The key was connected to a Leyden jar or a battery. And that is an image of the Leyden jar or a battery. Now, in 1879, Thomas Edison discovered the first light bulb. Time for you to critically think about your answers. Task 1. Explain how people perform the following activities before the discovery of electricity. So, how did people perform the following activities before the discovery of electricity? Okay? You've got cooking. How did people cook before electricity? Storing food, entertainment, heating and cooling system, and also seeing in the dark. I'm going to ask you to pause the recording to complete this critical thinking task. Welcome back. So cooking, they had wood stoves. Storing foods, they use a lot of preservation techniques that will allow food to last longer. Entertainment, they did a lot of outdoor play, reading, live concerts. Heating and cooling system, they had the fireplace instead. They had warm wool clothing because during the Middle Ages, wool was the major export during that time. And finally, seeing in the dark, they had candles or they had kerosene lamps. So all of these were what people did before the discovery of electricity. So thank you to Thomas Edison for the discovery of the first light bulb. Task 2, we're going to look at the evolution of energy resources, a visual timeline. So you need to click the link, check the timeline out in order for you to answer the questions. The visual aid is very, very good, the timeline, because it shows you how energy has changed over time. So you need to visit the website and write your answers down in your exercise book or on a sheet of paper, because just a reminder, all the answers to the task need to also be submitted with your work at the end. So these are the questions. When was the world's earliest definite use of fire in China? In 2000 BC, what fossil fuel did the Chinese use for heating and cooking? Number 3, in 500 BC, what energy source was used in Greek homes? 4, when were the first windmills introduced in Europe with a horizontal axis to grind grains? 5, what is the world's largest hydroelectric power plant built? And 6, what happened in 2011? So if you look at the timeline, you'll be able to answer the following questions. Now I'm going to ask you to pause the recording, check out the timeline. It's a brilliant visual aid. It breaks it down extremely well into small chunks, and it shows the evolution of energy sources over time. So pause the recording and answer these questions in your exercise book. Thank you. Right, welcome back. So number 1, when was the world's earliest definite use of fire in China? That should be 460,000 BC. Number 2, the fossil fuel used by the Chinese at the time is coal. Number 3 should be solar energy was used in the Greek homes at this time. So that energy is coming from the sun. The first windmills would be in the 1100s. 5, it's supposed to be when was the world's largest hydroelectric power plant built? That would have been 1935. Sorry about the mistake on that question. And 6, what happened in 2011? There was an earthquake off the coast of Japan that damaged 4 nuclear power plants. So it shows you how energy has changed over time. Amazing. Right. Why am I showing you the following trends? These are UK trends, and it's taken from the government website. And in the figure, it shows the change in energy consumption by sector and fuel from 1970 to 2018. The reason why I'm showing you the graph with different trends is that this is a very important scale to have throughout your progression to GCSEs and in life, the ability to analyze and interpret graphs. And you don't necessarily need any scientific background or knowledge to tackle data analysis question. So it's just a matter of a skill that's required to tackle these questions. And I think the more practice you get, or the more exposure to examples you get, the better your level of understanding, or the better you'll be able to tackle these questions. So here you have the change in energy consumption by the sector. You've got the graph that's color coded. As you can see, the blue represents industry, that sector, the green transport, the purple services, and the orange domestic. Okay, and as you can see here, you can see that transport has the highest energy consumption. As you can see, the transport line is above all the others. So that's one of the conclusions that could be made from this graph, that the transport sector has the highest energy consumption by sector. Okay. On the other hand, you could argue that the lowest energy consumption by sector would obviously be industry. As you can see, you have a negative slope going down from the top all the way to the bottom as time progressed. Okay. As you can see, if you look at the domestic sector, it hasn't, yes, it was fluctuating from 1970 all the way to 2010. You experienced a lot of fluctuations, but it didn't change much. And the same for services, as you can see, it's pretty much been the same from the 1970s to 2010. On the other hand, what conclusions can you make from the graph in terms of the energy consumption by fuel? You could say that here you have coal and other solid that that you can see that you had the biggest drop here. in coal and other solid, so which is quite good because we know that coal is a fossil fuel, it's non-renewable, and it can contribute to global warming. So you can see that from 1970 to 2010, you had a fall in the use of coal and other solid materials. Okay, and on the other hand, you can also we can argue that we have natural gas here that saw the most increase from the 1970 to 2010. So these are trends that you can obtain from the graphs. You can see petroleum was high in 1970, and obviously after the 1970, about 1975, you started to see a decrease, then it increased again, then a decrease. So you can see that petroleum is quite fluctuating. So these are different trends that you can obtain about the uses of energy over time. Let's look at another one. Here you have shares of electricity generation. You can see that the first example was from the year of 2018, and the second example was shows 2019. Again, these are UK trends that's happening in our country, and this happened in 2018, and obviously this is in 2019. So shares of electricity. So you've got renewables, you've got oil and other, and as you can see here, you have renewable here, which is 36.8% in 2018. Also here you've got renewables, which is 37.4%. As you can see, renewable resources didn't change much from 2018 to 2019. If you look at nuclear as well at the bottom here, you don't have much change from 2018 to 2019. Same for gas. Gas in 2018 and 2019 were pretty much the same. However, what you can conclude here from the pie charts is that there was a similar percentage of shares in electricity generation for both years because there weren't that much difference in the changes. But you could also conclude that the biggest change was a 2.7% decrease in the shares for coal. So as you can see here, coal was 5.8% in 2018, but in 2019, the shares of electricity generation for coal was 3.1%. So coal saw the biggest decrease. Okay, remember that coal is non-renewable. It's also a fossil fuel, and it contributes to global warming, which has a lot of negative effects on the environment. Okay, rise in temperature can cause sea levels to expand and rise, leading to floods. If the temperature rises too much, it can lead to the ice caps melting, and that can also affect species, for example, the polar bears. And we can conclude here that the decrease occurred due to the use of renewable resources, because in 2018, your renewable resources here was about 36.8%. And then as you can see, 2019, there was an increase in renewable resources, which meant that there would be a decrease in the non-renewable resources. So it's very important that you're able to look at different graphs, whether it's a line graph, a bar graph, or pie charts, and interpret data that's in front of you. So to practice, I'm going to ask you to look at this graph and identify two trends using data from the bar graph, okay? And give you a reasoning for the trend. So here, as you can see, on the x-axis, you have the year. The years here at the bottom in X. And on the y-axis, you have the generation, okay? The amount of electricity that's generated, okay? So I'm going to ask you to pause the recording, see if you can identify two trends in the bar graph. Right. You could have said that the overall electricity generation has fallen since 2010, because if you look back here at the graph, you started off In 2009, it was about 380. And as you can see, as the years increase, overall electricity generation went down. You could also say that the total electricity generated was the highest in 2010. If you go back to 2010 here, you can see that the total amount of electricity generated was the highest. So all these are different trends that you can obtain from this bar graph. You could have also said that the total electricity generated was the lowest in 2019. So you have the highest, which is the peak, and you also have the lowest. And the possible reasoning for this is you could say that the electricity generation was due to the more use of renewable resources, for example, wind or solar energies or hydroelectric power. And also climate. If the climate is warmer at that time, depending on the season, then the demand for electricity will obviously reduce. So these are different examples that you could have said to get marks for this answer. It's a very good activity to learn early the skill of graph analysis. Right. So complete the end of lesson quiz on Google Classroom. Please don't forget to hit the submit button, and bear in mind that there is a deadline. So please try your best to work to the deadline, complete the quiz, submit, and I will be marking and giving you positive feedback. So well done for today, and see you next time. And remember to stay safe. Miss Burnett.